Physician prompt engineering. What is it? Well, this is exploration of ways that doctors can use large language models to help accelerate and elevate their medical charting. I'm a pediatrician, and I've been able to make prompts that help take AI scribe output and format it exactly the way I want to see it in the note, which has been awesome. The current scribe products are good, but just not great and not as personalizable as they really probably will be in a few years. But using the generate text with AI feature that's inside Epic and other types of tools like that, as long as they're approved by your AT department, can let you kind of access that feature now. I've also been able to make prompts where it looks at the visit and it gives it the billing code and a rationale, and also like personalized patient summaries for after the visit with to-do lists. It's great. And so making these prompts, there's been three main things I've learned that I'd like to share with you. Specifically, this is tailored to that generate text with AI feature that's within Epic, although I do think by using lots of other types of tools, this would apply to most any large language model for these type of tasks. The big three lessons that I've learned that I want to share with you today is that few shot examples are critical. It's the best way to do these type of prompts. Number two, brevity often improves the quality of your output. And then finally, doing separate prompts for separate tasks. Few shot prompting, what is that? Well, you got to think about the way large language models work and what they are. At the end of the day, they're basically really fancy dictionary math that matches patterns, looks for patterns. And it's an oversimplification, but it's a good one. You can think of it like it's so good at matching patterns, it's able to look at English and figure out what should come next, which is crazy. And so while you can just give a prompt where you write out, please do this thing for me that I'm telling you about right now in this description, what's even better is just to give it the pattern and let it follow it. You can almost think of prompts as almost like giving a knitting pattern to like a sewing machine and saying like, here's one sock, make other socks like it. You know, that actually works a lot better than just describing a sock that you want it to knit. And so for a lot of things you want to do, the best thing to do is just give it 3 or 4 exemplars of exactly what you want to see and then go from there. Especially for things like the reformatting a scribe's output to match your perfect assessment plan. This is a great way to do it. When you're thinking about what examples to use, how many, things like that, there's a couple of different things to try. You want a sweet spot. If you don't give enough examples, you won't capture the full nuance of the possible things that might come up in real-world use. If you give way too many, what will happen is instead of generalizing the pattern, it will just say like, okay, I have 20 examples. This one is the most like example number 14, and it'll just spit out example number 14. So there's like a sweet spot. You want the right amount. And as you're trying to work on improving your prompts, there's a couple of things you can think of. Referencing Sandra Shuloff's prompt report. If you Google that, it'll come up. He's also been on several podcasts I'll link to at the end. Great place to start. I've listened and looked at a lot of resources on this. That was the most concise, most helpful, practical one that I can recommend to you. But he talks about 6 things you can look at when you're having a hard time with few shot prompting the examples to try to figure out how to improve the output. One is the quantity, just like we talked about. Second's the order. Interestingly, if you just have the same examples but put them in a different order, it might work better or it might break it. And again, I like thinking of this almost like a knitting pattern. If you just were using English to describe something, it wouldn't seem to matter too much in what order you described it. But if you think of it like a pattern going into like a factory or something like that, well, of course it could make a big difference in terms of how it looks at it. Distribution. Interestingly, like if you bias your distribution of your examples, it can actually bias your results. So like let's say you gave it 9 examples where the answer ended up being this is a well check, and then you gave 1 sick visit. You might find yourself getting your well check spiel put into your sick visits because it's almost biased. Like it thinks 9/10 of the time the well check should come out, and so it might come out inappropriately. So making an even distribution of what you actually see is a helpful thing. That being said, sometimes you want to bias it. You want it to mostly talk about well. So there's lots of different potential use cases. The best example I have of this is the billing prompt. So for that one, we did a bunch of examples where you told it like, okay, viral URI, Tylenol and Motrin, no tests or anything, 99213. If you gave it a bunch of examples of 99213s and maybe 1 or 2 examples of 4 and maybe 1 5, you want that distribution to kind of reflect reality, if that makes sense. If you gave it a whole bunch of 4s and 5s, it would definitely bias it to try to create a case for upbuilding, and so that's just an interesting thing to think through. Quality, this might sound silly, but I have had several times where I've looked and been trying to figure out what's broken, not been able to figure it out, and then I go back and look at the quality, and I realize some of my examples are just bad or wrong or broken, and that was the core issue. So if you have written out instructions inside the prompt and few shot examples and they disagree, it will probably go with the few shot examples and it will probably mess it up, or it'll be inconsistent. That's definitely something to look at. For format, it's helpful to know that a lot of these models were trained using question-answer format, like huge banks of question, like Q colon and answer colon. So that's a good default thing to use as you're trying to figure things out. But how you label things matters. So you can say input, output. You could just do no labels. There's lots of different ways you could format your prompts. But know that just like that knitting pattern idea, if you change the format, you're fundamentally changing the pattern you're asking it to follow, and that can really impact your performance for good or for bad. And so that's something you can try if you're having a hard time figuring out how to do a prompt, is try switching up the format. And then similarity, again, you can give several examples of similar type to really drive home a certain way to do things, or you can intentionally do very different ones and try to help it realize the train of thought in between how those examples work, and even sometimes annotating this is why this one would go this way versus this one would go this way. Showing it the chain of thought that you want it to follow is really helpful. Brevity improves quality. There's kind of a quote most people have heard. It's I didn't have the time to write a short letter, so here's a long one instead. If you can take the time to make your prompt as concise as possible, take that time to really figure out what you're asking, what you want, it will do better. So you're just giving shorter prompts or simpler patterns, just straight up. So the more you can make things simple, the better. And for output, I encourage the same thing. When you use these in clinic, you need to review them to make sure there's not any hallucinations and that it looks the way you want. And the shorter the output is, the quicker you'll find it to review, and it just really improves your overall experience. I initially made an assessment plan prompt that made these really verbose but beautifully organized things, and I was like, wow, that's a great note. If a student turned in this note, you'd be like, awesome. And I've actually moved away from that, and now my prompt gives me an output very similar to what I used to do by hand, which is just, dashed bullets, as concise as possible, short phrases, because we just want to be able to review it quickly and move on. We want to communicate the information clearly, concisely, move on, and that's just really helps. So in general, if nothing else is relevant, pursue Brevity to help improve your outputs. And then finally, separate prompts or separate tasks. In general, if you ask it to do two things at once, you are making the pattern it needs to follow infinitely more complex, because you're taking all of the possible permutations of the first task, all of them of the second, and you're multiplying them together to make it challenging. It is possible to do, and my after visit summary prompt is a good example of it. Does a warm sign off, and then it does a to-do list to follow. If you keep tracking with those, you can find if you get two tasks down really, really well, you can try putting them together and seeing how it does. It is possible, but you just got to know that it might be you change one word of that prompt and it breaks. It just makes it a lot more challenging. I imagine as these tools get better over time and their compute goes up, the resources go up, the context windows go up, I imagine this will continue to get easier. But for now, unless you've really got it locked down and you're up for doing the iterative changes to figure it out, I would keep them separate for now. And then this last slide, just some of the resources. Like I said, the Sander Schuloff, his resources have been the most actual, practical, real things that have actually helped me get things done. I encourage you to check out those two podcasts that he did. And then finally, Microsoft, Google, and also OpenAI, Anthropic, all the major companies in this space do have really great online resources about how to use prompts, because they want you to use their products. They want you to learn how to do it, feel comfortable. So really any of those is great. I always just like to mention too, this is a great example of how this technology changes things so much, and it's just so much more accessible. Ask the models how to use them. Ask them hey, I'm trying to make a prompt like this. This is what I'm getting. This is what I want. Can you help me figure it out? And it'll help you. So use the tool to help yourself use the tool. And finally, there's a note about the scientific method. I think that the ideal type of person to be working on this is someone who is coming at it from a scientist type of perspective. You have a hypothesis, you test it, you run experiments, you analyze the results, you make modifications, you keep iterating. That type of scientific method mindset is what's going to get you the most out of this, because the reality is it's also we're all trying to figure it out. There are no experts, and people who are willing to just jump in and experiment are the ones who are going to be able to get the most out of these things for the foreseeable future. So I encourage you to jump in, give it a try. I think you'll be super happy with the things you'll be able to build. I've been blown away by some of the stuff this has been able to help me do. All the best. Good luck.